O Romeo, Romeo, where art thou, Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name, or if thou wilt not, be sworn, my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. 'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, thou not a Montague. What's Montague? It is nor hand nor foot nor arm nor face nor any other part belonging to a man. Oh, be some other name. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other word would still smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title. I take thee at thy word, call me but love, and I'll be baptized. Henceforth I never will be Romeo. I'm sitting in Mrs. A's office, so I feel extra professional today. We're going over our 10th video, uh, names. And so this one's this is the most notes I've ever had for one, so I really packed it all in, so we'll see what happens. That was a quote from Romeo and Juliet, if you didn't catch it, about how names aren't important for them, right? And it doesn't matter that he's called a Montague because she's a Capulet and the families don't work. But then we find out they both die because of their names. And so I think Shakespeare's picking up on this biblical theme. Names are really important. And we find that to be true because we pick it up in Genesis 1 through 3. So let's start. What's in a name? And I just want to start with everyday usage because it's just kind of neat what I've been thinking through and asking people. So have you ever thought about your name? Like, why do we have names? And actually, we don't just have one name. Most people have at least three, right? And so you have your last name, which is, it's to do with your family, right? It organizes you into a group. You have your middle name, which is picked by your parents, so usually characteristics or something they liked. Then you have your first name, which is more personal, so you can say, "Oh, just call me Matthew," right? And then also you have a nickname, and a nick just being additional name. So you could be like, "Call me Matt," if we're extra personal. And so names are, well, first, actually, I want to give a couple more examples. We have names for companies as well. So like, go to Best Buy. And then also, if we want to make our pets at home more familiar, we'll have family pet names. And then, to me, it just strikes me odd that when we want to make our significant other more special, we call them pet names. So honey, muffin, muffin pie. That's not a thing. Buttercup. Anyway, yeah. So uh, I think there's two different reasons that I've come across for why we have names, and so one is classification, and like Anne of Green Gables, I found a quote, and she calls names handles, something to grasp onto, or if you think about like Star Wars: The Clones, like why don't if it is just classification so that we know who people are, why aren't we called B31921 like the clones? I think there's something more to it. So the other idea is maybe it's value, and I think there can be positive value or negative value in names. So people hate it when you forget their name, and they love it when you remember their name. Or if you talk about nominations, the root being nominee is about names. It's like you're appointing someone a job or a position because they're important. And then some cultures don't even consider a baby to be fully human yet, or a whole person yet, until it's named. So that's interesting. And on the negative side, to not name something is seen as devaluing it. So like you look at villains in movies and stuff, and they're left unnamed, or they're given like euphemisms like Dr. Claw or the Joker or Scar. And so yeah, they're never called Mike or Jenny or something. So people who raise farm animals also do the same thing. You're not going to name, well, for the most part, some people are weird like that, but you're not going to name an animal that you're going to eat, probably, or there becomes an attachment to it. And so it's almost like you get value from what you're classified in. So they kind of come together. It's not that it's just a classification as a name, and it's not just value. It's you're getting value from what someone classifies you as. And so I wanted to give an example for this, just to keep us going on everyday usage. I'm really into Aladdin. So let's just look at some of the names in Aladdin. First of all, Aladdin, and these are all Hindi names, and so you have Aladdin translating as the noble character of faith, roughly noble character of faith. And so it couldn't be more obvious that you're supposed to imitate Aladdin, and the story that he goes through is your story. He's the protagonist. Then you have his little sidekick monkey. Aladdin's without a father, right? Well, then you have Abu, and Abu, just like Abba, means father in Arabic, and so it's like Abu is like a replacement for Aladdin's father, and then of course Abu's a terrible person, thieving. Well, not a person, thieving monkey that he's following. So not the best replacement father. And then the next movie you get Kasim, whose name means sharer, and he's the opposite of a thief, right? You have Lago, who's actually from Shakespeare, which is kind of why I brought that quote in, which means lagoon and kind of eerie. There's some other stuff there with eyes, but also Raja, I think I'm saying that right. King, which totally makes sense as a lion. Genie, coming from genius, is kind of there's more behind that, but the idea that he's the knower of the whole world, basically. And then Jasmine. Jasmine it's really connected with the moon, and then being a symbol of female beauty. So, yeah, that's interesting. And so that's a little not normal in our culture, but names are more significant in the Bible than in our culture. So, like our first, second, and third name, not that important. Bible, your value completely comes from your classification or your name. And so let's start. Finally, this might be a long video, but I think it's a good one. God called the day the light day. And so the last act of God bringing order to chaos, or bringing light into existence, is giving it a name. And so you have the idea of a person isn't real to you, just a guy walking on the street, isn't really real to you until you find out their name. And so now, God naming light, he's bringing it full circle and bringing it into being. And so what is really, when it says God called it light, it's called, the idea is an intentional, direct message, not just random words, thought out speaking. And so the idea that this is a really vague category, and that's what we have in Genesis usually, but what comes out of that is you can either do the intentional speaking positively or negatively. So this is almost 3 words, which is why it's long. You have calling. Under that, you have blessing, which is positive calling, and cursing, which is negative calling. And so, for instance, Genesis 1:28, God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, increase in number, fill the earth, subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and every other living creature that moves on the ground." Cursing. So there's negative intentional words as well. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all your days of your life. So both are a declaration of what someone is, and not so much, or not primarily, what will happen to them. So this is neat. What happens in the blessing that God gave, blessed and you'll rule, God actually gives man the power to name other people as well. And so man can now bring order to chaos through naming, which is the means to doing that. Because it is a power to name things. Adam names the animals, Adam names his wife, and so let's just look at some biblical names. I would like to note that the Bible people, they don't have surnames like we do, or last names, but they did in a sense. So you'd have, like, for example, David ben Yishai, which means David, son of Jesse, and so they would just title their last name basically by their father, your son of someone. So like Aladdin, let's look at some characters. Names are so important. If you really want to understand the Bible, you need to know what the Hebrew name means in English, so you can really get the point. So Abraham, most people know that one. Abraham, father of many. Balaam, the one who tries to curse Israel, destroyer of the people. Here's a long one, Isaiah 9:6, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, that one. It's all just one name, Pele Yoetz El Gibor Aviad Sar Shalom. I'm probably not pronouncing that, but the whole name is a supernatural planner, is the mighty God, the Father of the time, is the Prince of Peace. That's the longest name in the Bible. Rachel, you, which fits right in. Or Shem, this is a study on its own. Shem, his name means name. So that's interesting. Or like the idea of a reputation. And then my personal favorite, Jacob. And his name, of course, means like heel grabber, kind of the idea of a deceiver. And all he wanted his whole life was a good word spoken to him, a blessing spoken to him, and he schemed for it. He wanted his father to tell him that he was a good person per se. He schemed for it, and his world imploded because of it. He got stuck with Leah, had to leave his home. His brother hated him. Just not a good time. And so yeah, but I think one more guy to kind of bring it full circle. Barabbas. This is another cool one. His name means son of the Father, and so if you remember, Barabbas is the guy who they let go to crucify Jesus, and so now you have one son of the Father, Barabbas, being replaced by another son of the Father, and so it's interesting. Jesus is subbing in for Barabbas, but he also subs in for us because we're called the sons of God, and so it's the same as Jacob. Just as Jacob realized that the angel he had fought spared his life, that's when he had his name changed. That's when he understood that I am a different person. I'm not just a deceiver. I'm what Christ says I am, right? Because he spared his life for me. Obviously, I have value in that. So, this is kind of interesting. Here's just a tidbit. In Catholic exorcism, you had to get the demon to give up its name before you could actually remove it. So it's the idea of naming your sin. So we really have to understand the curse is on us. We brought it on ourselves. We're selfish people. That's our nature. We're the deceivers. We're the people trying to get our own blessing, but we don't deserve it. And so once we recognize it, it should be known that God is the original namer, like we saw in Genesis, and he has decided already. We don't have to do anything for it, as Revelation states. It gives us new white stones and new names. So our names are now, we're accepted, we're loved, we're forgiven. And then my personal favorite is we're disciples, and the idea that we're learners, which means God is so patient in teaching us. To develop this, since we also have the power of naming, we should cautiously use this power with our voices and words, and we must make sure that we do moral and appropriate and thoughtful manner of naming things. And like you have name calling, don't do that positively. Call people good names, right? So a couple more thoughts. The Hebrew word for soul is neshama or nefesh, something like that, depending. But the idea is the two middle letters for neshama is shin and mem, and then they make up the word shem, which we already saw is Shem the man, which means name. And so the idea is neshama means soul, and so your nature, who you are, your soul, your life, right in the middle of it, who it is, the central part of that is your name. Your name is the key to your soul, and so you want to have a true name, and we can only have that through Christ. And so, okay, and Switchfoot totally picks up on this, so I'm going to share. Sing it to me, whisper into my ear, the accuser's voices, they start to disappear, in the winds, in the tongues of the flame, and in my soul, in my one true name. Or from Ben, your janitor, my name on earth is known to man, but God, through his perfect plan, changed my name when I received a brand new birth after I believed. Here's one more, actually. Each of us has a name given by God and given by our parents. Each of us has a name given by our statue and our smile and given by what we wear. Each of us has a name given by the mountains and given by our walls. Each of us has a name given by the stars and given by our neighbors. Each of us has a name given by our sins and given by our longing. Each of us has a name given by our enemies and given by our love. Each of us has a name given by our celebrations and given by our work. Each of us has a name given by the seasons, given by our blindness. Each of us has a name given by the sea and given by our death. I know this is a long video. I hope you learned something. There's so much more to be unpacked. But we are renamed. And hopefully you know that. Until next time.